The Woolworth Building, a nice bridge between what we talked about and what we're going to talk about, because it's just so much taller. Incredible. Let me pull up the stats here. Obviously, it's 233 Broadway, and still standing, of course, in Cass Gilbert, by far his most famous building. I have to say, we are at the Museum of American Finance. When we talk about the year 1913, we are talking about the creation of what? The Internal Revenue Service that year, what became known as the IRS. Yeah. So. There it is on the left, again, another postcard. Oh, another demolition project, if we had time to talk about it. The City Hall Post Office building that was demolished, I think in the 50s or 60s. The low building there with the Beaux-Arts dome over it, gone. The encroachment, again, one of the themes I like to keep hammering there on the right, so that you don't see the building from as far away. Or if you're lucky enough, maybe you're on the 50th floor of an adjacent building, then you do have a better view. Very vertical building. There's a lot of vertical elements, some horizontal, but not as horizontal elements as others. Anyway, Cass Gilbert was commissioned by Frank W. Woolworth. And for those of you, again, who are younger, that is the Sam's Club or Target or Walmart of its day, 100 years ago. The Woolworth had all these nickel and dime stores, and he had two requirements that he gave to Cass. And he said, first, that the building, he wanted to incorporate his new corporate headquarters to resemble London's Houses of Parliament. So he needed to have it be, of course, then Gothic revival, and it had to be at least 50 feet taller than the MetLife Tower that we saw there on Madison Square Park. Wound up being 55 stories, but that's sort of deceiving. When you hear stories, you have to actually break down what are the metrics. It would actually be, in today's numbers, be about 80 stories, because some of the building's floors vary between 11 and up to 20 feet in height. Here is architect Cass Gilbert. He is so well known, especially in his day, that later on a Cass Gilbert Society was created, and that's their plaque on the right for him. Very distinguished looking gentleman. Here it is under construction. Again, it's really amazing to see a building like this that's so famous for its terracotta, but we see it with just the steel skeleton here. And what makes this photograph doubly fascinating is that you have the 1914 municipal building right next door that the city of New York uses, and that's going up, and that's ahead of schedule, of course, to the Woolworth Building there. Amazing to see all that going up at the same time, with not much else around it. It was obviously the tallest and most recognizable skyscraper in New York City for 16 years until something called the Chrysler Building came along. There was a 29-story platform, so the 29-story part, and then, so it's kind of in two halves. The tower insets on all four sides at the 42nd story, much higher up, and becomes an octagon at the 48th story, and has a 3-story copper-clad roof. And speaking of roofs, more madmen of a different kind. Look at these guys working up there at the very top of the finial, and you have the Park Road building just behind them there with those two domes, or cupolas. That building I told you was the tallest in the world from 1899 to about 1906 or 08 for the Singer Building. And you can see then the juxtaposition, how much taller the Woolworth Building is in 1913 to what at one time was the tallest building in the world. They're looking way down at it. And then of course, if you squint, you can see people down the level there, little specks. Another crazy photo, same idea. Wait for the camera. My goodness. To me, complete madness. I'm totally afraid of heights. I don't even get on roller coasters. I can imagine doing this. Beautiful 1940s era black and white photo, just showing Gothic elements. Again, Gothic revival, or as I would call it, American Gothic, as we'll see here in a minute. But in the meantime, I want to note what's missing this floor plan. This is from one of the floors in the penthouse. And you'll see, oh, okay, you come up the elevator, you have the butler's pantry, there's the kitchen, sure, breakfast room, dining room, ooh, a couple of nice bedrooms, bathrooms, ooh, laundry room, great. Where's the living room? Well, of course, the living room and other family spaces and offices are on other floors, because this is the multi-floor penthouse that you can buy. I'm not completely up to date on everything, but this was a story that they ran in the New York Post a few years back, showing the breakdown of what you would get for your millions and millions of dollars. There's all the madness about the building up on Central Park, that it was $90 million for that penthouse. So I had to bring in something that was old school to show you it's just as mad when it comes to its pricing. and you get all these different living spaces, a separate apartment, and of course, gorgeous views. You can bring your friends up to the lantern. There it is, lit up at night. Again, the post office building that was demolished in the foreground. But this is about advertising. Just think Target or Sam's Club today, what have you, and the idea that you want to have people remember who you are. So Woolworth wanted to be remembered. And I love that egos can even try to take on Mother Nature or God and try to even surpass the cloud cover. And that's the one building that did for that weather front. As I call American Gothic, see the eagle right in the middle of this slide, right in the middle, right over the front door. Something you would never see in Europe on any kind of public building, but you're going to see it a lot in New York City and Chicago. The inside is actually more Romanesque, if you're really trying to pick a style. One being modeled after a Romanesque church in Europe, and the other one a Romanesque-inspired guild hall. And so we're in the lobby right now, arguably the most ornate lobby in all of New York City or the United States. Here's the other end of it, going up the stairs. Incredible craftsmanship. Just imagine what it would cost today to put this together with all the incredible craftsmen that we had brought over from Europe. Okay, so we have a lot of egos in our Mad Men. Upper left corner, of course, is Cass Gilbert inspecting his fine work. In the middle, we have the person who has to pay for it, Frank W. Woolworth, and he paid for it completely in cash. There's no mortgage, there's no loans. He paid as the building was being built, so he could open up debt-free in 1913. And there he is with his quarters or silver dollars or what have you. The next two, we have the developer going over the paperwork in the upper right, and in the bottom is the engineer. Let me just pull up his name here. Gunwald Aus measures a steel girder. He's the structural engineer on the project. So fanciful, humorous gargoyles, American Gothic. Saints of Commerce. Bankers Trust Company, 1912 at 16 Wall Street by Trowbridge and Livingston. Livingston, an old New York name. It goes way back with Philip and Robert and everyone else, Livingston. I won't say too much about this other than I wanted to show you that it's a great example of neoclassicism and even neo-ancient, I guess, neo-Egyptian, because you have almost like an Egyptian pyramid atop it there. And the problem is you can't see it from the road. On the far right here, it's very difficult when you're standing there at Wall Street to actually appreciate the top of the building. So half the reason is to show you that there really is something gorgeous up there that resembles some of the buildings that we're more familiar with up in the 20s, Madison Square Garden area. But you don't see this one as much or some of the other buildings around it because you have these huge glass boxes that are 60 and 70 stories high now. Even some of the Art Deco buildings help block it nowadays. This is the building that this building was the predecessor for, okay? So they tore down this building. Now, this is the amazing stats on this one. I think it was built, Gillender Building, 1897. It stood for only 13 years. Now that's madness. That's Mad Men of the Era. What a gorgeous building. But of course, as we see in this slide here, if you look at the red is the shadow, that Gillender Building juxtaposed against the Bankers Trust Company building. You can see the increased profit they have with all the extra airspace they could build. Of course, in the middle again, showing the steel and terracotta construction. The final product on the right. This building wound up being 540 feet tall, and it stands on a very tiny 94 by 97 foot plot. Very interesting. Must be to build that structurally. Nearby, we also, I just want to mention briefly, had to say something. The Standard Oil Building, just because it's so pretty, it had to deal with the curve of Bowling Green here. 1922. Just wanted to show yet another one of those beautiful old postcards and the lantern detail there on the right. Again, a Corinthian colonnade atop the building there with a pyramid top, following that theme I've been talking about. But I wanted to surprise you with this one. We don't think of skyscrapers as being churches, but we have to throw this one in for fun. Riverside Cathedral, which just gets overlooked because it's at the other end of the island, and we don't think about it in terms of commerce, but what a beautiful building at 490 Riverside Drive. It fits the era that we're talking about, 1930, built by Charles Collins and Burnham Hoyt. You could call it New York's last great eclectic skyscraper and its Gothic revival features, because when you see 1930, you're already thinking Chrysler Building, Empire State, and so forth, and all the Art Deco. It was modeled after a 13th century French Gothic cathedral of Chartres and sheathed in Indiana limestone. That tower is 390 feet high and is actually a 30-story office building. They have a lot of church offices in there, lounges and other assorted types of spaces. The basement, in fact, actually has a full-length basketball court, a movie theater, and a 4-lane bowling alley. Right? Why don't we have that here, David? It also features the largest bell clock. Wait till you see this. Brought over from the makers in England, it weighed in at over, apparently, 100 tons. So you can imagine the steel that's involved in the tower for this cathedral, and also the fact that there are elevators, unlike the kind of churches and cathedrals that we're used to in Europe. These have the tallest elevators of any church in the world, taking you up 3/4 of the way to the observation deck.